Good morning, everybody. Let me do a little housekeeping here. Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. I'm Janet Irwin, Head of Education at the Ulrich Museum, and we are delighted to have all of you join us for our virtual Senior Wednesday program this morning with Jedd Beaudoin, who is curating playlists inspired by our ongoing Ulrich and Artists and You Community Billboard Project on view throughout Wichita, July through November. If you would like to learn more about the Billboard Project or the full lineup of upcoming Ulrich virtual programs, please visit our beautifully redesigned and easy to navigate website. There you will find maps of the Billboard locations, in-depth information on the works of art featured, ways you can use the Smartify app, and links to Jedd's playlists to listen to while you drive, walk, or bike through Wichita to see the billboards each month. Our next Ulrich virtual program features conceptual artist Hank Willis-Thomas and Dr. Deborah Willis on Tuesday, October 25th at 6 p.m. We will also have artist talks with Kajin Fujita, Terry Evans, Jane Quick-to-See-Smith, and many others coming up in the weeks and months ahead. And don't miss out on our next book discussion in our virtual stories series on September 8th to discuss Running with Sherman by Christopher McDougall with KMUW's Beth Golay. Our next Senior Wednesday on September 16th will introduce you to our new registrar, Joe Cox, with a presentation on abstract artist Hilma Af Klimt. You can register for each of these easily by visiting the program page on our website or events on the Ulrich app. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Jedd Beaudoin, host of the nationally syndicated music program Strange Currency, which airs Monday through Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. on KMUW. Jedd earned his BA in English from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and an MFA in creative writing from Wichita State University. A music journalist since the late 1990s, his work has appeared in publications such as No Depression, Pop Matters, Noisy, and many others. He has also taught in WSU's Department of English and the Department of Art and Design and Creative Industries. So everyone, help me welcome Jedd to our program today.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me and see me okay?
You sound great.
Okay. Hi. So thank you, Jana, and thanks for letting me be part of this wonderful series and for inviting me to put together Spotify playlists for this. So I think what we'll do today is I'll kind of walk you through some of my thinking in terms of putting this together, and I'll bring up some of the slides that go with the billboards. And basically, I put together a 2-hour music show 6 nights a week. And so when I asked Jana how long, for the playlist, and she said somewhere around half an hour or so, I thought, that'll be easy to bring something together that's a little bit shorter in length. What I did in each of these was I wanted to have something that spoke, at least to me, the language of the image. I tried in a lot of cases to sort of avoid obvious connections. I think that sometimes, since art can be so subjective and music is so subjective in terms of we like this or we don't like that, or this evokes a certain mood for me, maybe it doesn't evoke the same mood for you. I tried to keep that in mind as I was putting them together, but also to have some consideration for the images themselves and what was being present. And so it's sort of a fine line between wanting to not be too close to what the image is, but then also to sort of honor the image. So the first one from Hank Willis Thomas, "I'm a Man." I put together this playlist that begins with a song by Gary Clark Jr., "This Land," and I'll just play a little bit of that for you. When I start a playlist, whether it's my show or something like this, or if I'm making something for a friend, I always want to start with a piece that kind of announces where we're going. So this is a little bit of Gary Clark Jr.'s "This Land."
Hey yo, this is my land. I'm right around the 20-mile marker. The sky seems darker where I stand. My only partner is the bullseye on my back. Courtesy of the archer, a reminder that life is a limited time offer. I'm young, black, and electric, and considered a weapon. My son actually threatened my one African essence. The real bodies are buried with the secrets in the silo. For people in denial or the Lincolns in the bio, the objects in the mirror are closer than they might seem. The shadow of doubt disappears at light speed. Hopes and dreams get lost into a tight rope from trees hanging since 1619. Strange the way the danger could inspire major good. I play a power chord, there goes the neighborhood.
So with Gary Clark Jr., one of the reasons that I chose that as kind of the opening piece in that playlist was the song has historical references. It also sort of speaks to the contemporary climate, and I thought it also was a nice confluence of sort of classic influences. Gary Clark Jr.'s primarily known as a blues musician, I guess. But there, of course, he incorporates elements of hip hop, rap music, so on and so forth, and gives it kind of a interesting take. He's speaking about historical events, and he's also sort of giving us a historical journey through the music by mixing and matching sort of different influences along the way. And I also thought, because I know that the song is somewhat personal to him, it's in part in some of the ways that he's experienced racism in his lifetime. I thought that this also fit with Hank Willis Thomas and what he's saying in terms of the image here that we see with I'm a man, I'm a man repeated, and so that was kind of my thinking with that playlist. And it was also important to me to spotlight Black musicians in that playlist along the way. The next one that I chose in that, and I won't walk you through song by song necessarily here, but the next one that I chose in that playlist is from Andre Simone, who, if you know the musician Prince, Andre Simone was a childhood friend of Prince's. And in 2017, he made a record called 1969 because he was seeing parallels between the political climate of 2015, 2016, and 2017, parallels between our time and the late 1960s, civil rights movement and political unrest, so on and so forth. And one of the songs that he released on that album is a piece called "Black Man in America," which I'll play a little bit of now.
In the promised land, brothers get shot, no hesitation. Way of life for a generation. This is all true. You don't understand. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And if I should die before I wake, pray the Lord my soul to take. We've been struggling 50 years, sacrificed through blood and tears, just trying to break through this here promised land. You don't know what it's like to be a black man in America.
And so I one of the things that I really love about Andre Simone's song Black Man in America and that album 1969 in general is that it's not just reflections. You can hear the marching chant of no justice, no peace throughout the song. So there again, he's sort of bringing in a historical element into the song. It's reflected in the art. It's not just something that's happening in isolation. So as I kind of worked through that playlist and thinking about that, again, really trying to focus on Black musicians and things that were reflective of similarities and differences throughout history, I closed out that particular playlist with a song recorded by the Austin, Texas band Los Coast, featuring Gary Clark Jr., who sort of led off the playlist. I thought it was a nice bookend that it would sort of start and begin with something that he was involved in. And this, of course, is a new version of the great Sam Cooke song, A Change Is Gonna Come, which, of course, was so instrumental in the civil rights movement and has served, I think, as kind of an anthem or a reflection on the civil rights movement in the United States. So let's hear a little bit of Los Coast and Gary Clark Jr. with A Change Is Gonna Come.
I was born by a river in a little town. Oh, and just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know the change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will.
So there too, one of the ideas in making the playlist is that there'll sort of be, emotional peaks and valleys, and starting with Gary Clark Jr. and This Land, which we'll just go back to for a second. Having this sort of sense of foreboding with these strange kind of guitar and synthesizer noises at the beginning, this idea that we're beginning a journey, and then the version of A Change Is Going to Come. Having some sort of resolution within that. So, my hope in that was that there'll be, again, some reflection on the image itself, and then some reflection maybe on the lyrical content on that playlist, because I chose things that were, specific reactions to realities. So the next image that we'll take a look at is by Luis Cruz Azacada, Lotto, The American Dream, from 1992. And this, I don't want to pick favorites, but this image was so striking to me and wonderful. I think the colors are so vibrant and amazing. And this idea, of course, of the American dream, and thinking back to 1992 when I was kind of beginning my journey as an adult at that point, and the situations that were going on in the culture at that moment. Of course, we have the LA riots. Within a few years of that, we have the O.J. Simpson trial, and this kind of idea about what's happening to the American dream. So if I go up to the playlist for that, and it'll take me just a second here. I chose to start this off with a piece by the Los Angeles band Los Lobos, and this comes from a record that they made in the the mid to late 80s called By the Light of the Moon. And this is a song called One Time, One Night, which I think speaks to kind of this idea of the American dream and what's happening to it. So we'll play a little bit of this here.
Places he had been to and the things that he had seen. Quiet was ain't no song about the home of the brave and the man who run the street. One time, one night,
So, there again, starting off with that song to me has always been powerful because it speaks to different versions of the American dream and what becomes of them when they sort of become dashed by one thing or another. And yet there's all this optimism, I think, as well in the music. And the music itself is such a wonderful confluence of sort of traditional Mexican music. There's country music in there, and of course, rock and roll. And that to me seemed like the perfect place to kind of start this off and thinking about this idea of the American dream. And that was something that I kept thinking about throughout the playlist itself. Another song that I chose, which came out in the same era as this piece by Jackson Browne called Lawless Avenues. What we won't hear in this piece, because it comes later on in the song, is that there are a couple of verses in Spanish basically discussing this idea of what becomes of the American dream, and is there hope for young people? What are we sort of teaching the children of tomorrow about how to get along with each other and so forth? And so I'll play just a little bit of Jackson Browne's Lawless Avenues here.
hit him, I kissed him, made him go to catechism. With the sisters in their black and white. The time goes city street. Him another kind of wisdom. When to run and when to fight. I'm at the playground after school, listening to tales of the prison system. And those lawless avenues.
So, there again, there's a little bit of a Latin influence. And unlike the previous playlist, I didn't necessarily adhere to one particular musical style or necessarily think the same about the lyrical content. I was a little bit less concerned with historical consistency with the image itself. I just thought about things that spoke to me about the American dream and different versions of the American dream. And in this particular case, because I love Los Lobos so much, I chose to end this playlist the way I began it, which was with another Los Lobos song. This time, a piece called "The Neighborhood," and this record came out about 1992, and here's a little piece of that.
Trouble on the street, a piece of rock to make me and everyone in me. Hold the baby in the bed, dreams and wings dancing in the rain. A love forever, what he said, what he said. is easy. I know it's just it's and stay. Oh, doesn't care. Saturday night hardly makes enough to keep her alive. She thoughts in her head with tears in her eyes. Another day, I'm not along this way. Please pray.
I let that one go a little bit longer because it's just always great to hear Los Lobos and that that wonderful confluence again of different musics that they bring together, and thinking about early 1990s Los Angeles and conflicts that were going on there, and of course how that also reflects with the image itself. Um, This next one is from Patrick Dugas, and this is a little bit strange for me to put together because I know Patrick personally, and have seen this image many times over the years, and of course have become a great lover of Patrick's work in the years that I've known him, and I really love the way that he creates this tension between these two rooms, and it's just such a wonderful piece, and his colors are so vivid and so forth. So that was a little bit of a challenge, actually knowing the artist and wanting to be cautious that I didn't somehow reflect too much of their taste, knowing them, and then also having these sort of two entities in this image, maybe as opposed to one sort of dominant thing. These two worlds. So the songs that I chose in that case, and my playlist just disappeared. There we go. Are in part about that. They're about strangers. They're about people meeting each other and falling away and so forth. And this one, I stuck maybe with some more traditional taste, starting it off with a piece by the band The Kinks called Strangers, and then ending it with a sort of obscure song by a musician named Bill Fay called Be Not So Fearful. In this case, a cover version of that song, a remake of it. We'll hear just a little bit of Be Not So Fearful, in this case performed by Damien Jurado and Richard Swift.
You will not.
And there I thought this was a good way to end this, especially at a time where I think there is a lot of fear, and a fear of maybe people we don't know, strangers. Of course, we're all concerned about our health in this climate, maybe more so than in past years, because we have this pandemic going on, and at the same time, just remembering sort of basic human decency within that, and that the person who's a stranger today will be sort of a friend tomorrow. So that one was, they were all fun to put together, but this one sort of made me kind of think a little bit outside of what I would normally put together. And then, of course, the wonderful Gordon Parks with images of Muhammad Ali in 1966. And this one really struck me because I just recently rewatched a powerful documentary about a fight in the 1970s between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali, known as the Rumble in the Jungle, where they traveled to Zaire. And if you remember the boxing promoter, Don King was part of this, and they brought all kinds of musicians together. James Brown was there, and this documentary sort of chronicles this moment where Muhammad Ali was maybe past his prime. George Foreman was sort of the younger fighter who was on his way up and very, how do we say, prideful. And just this moment in time where Ali sort of recreates or recaptures a little bit of his glory, and George Foreman becomes humbled by this defeat. That, of course, is several years before Gordon Parks, several years after Gordon Parks' images. And we know, of course, of Gordon Parks' relationship with Kansas. We have some of his works in the archives at the Abel Library at Wichita State. And he's just such a phenomenal photographer, and his images to me are just always so powerful. They're never quite. It's like he knows what people are expecting in a photograph, and then he transcends that somehow. And there's a real intimacy, I think, especially with the image here of Ali's face, sort of more the portrait, and then of course of him with preparing for a fight. And in this case, one of the things that stood out to me was that Muhammad Ali, of course, was such an activist in addition to being an athlete, and so in the moment of the struggle for civil rights and equality and so forth. And I really wanted to create a playlist that spoke to that. So I thought the best way of leading that off was with the James Brown song, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. And James Brown with that song, that seemed like such an obvious place to begin. It spoke to me not only in terms of James Brown and who he was in the culture, but also in music in general, making that statement at that particular moment in time. I also chose a song that I was overly familiar with it from the Bob Dylan version, but less familiar until fairly recently with the Staples Singers version of Bob Dylan's A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. And spending some time with the music of the Staples Singers over the last year, I was struck by how many times they recorded Bob Dylan songs in the 1960s. So here's a little bit of their version of A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall.
Oh, where have you been, my wandering son? Where have you been, my darling young one? I stumble alongside of 12 misty mountains. 12 misty mountains. I've walked and I've crawled on 6 crooked highways. 6 crooked highways. I've been out in the front of a dozen dead oceans.
And what struck me there is, I think, just like Gordon Parks, the Staples Singers have a way of finding something unexpected in a song. Bob Dylan, of course, across the decades has continually been criticized for his singing voice, and some people sometimes feeling that it undermines the beauty and poetry of his words. I've sort of adjusted to his voice and heard it as being the perfect vehicle in some cases for those words. But I think that the Staples Singers really show the beauty of that song and the beauty of the lyrics along the way. And so again, if you haven't been overly familiar with the Staples Singers, I really encourage you to seek out some of the records that they made in the 1960s, and especially their versions of Bob Dylan songs. So this next one from Romar Bearden, Tidings, was another one that was it was fun to put together in a different way, um, because I wasn't overly familiar with his work, um, and so seeing that image for the first time, and or seeing that image and thinking for the first time about what music I would put together, it's so, I think, informed by collage, and there's a sense of collage within it, and these images that he places in this box that suddenly I don't think if we saw them separately they would work in the same way, but here they work fairly well together. So I started with this piece, a musician named Adrian Young called "Turn Down the Sound," and it just seemed to me like the perfect place to start with this. And that, to me, that particular piece of music has a little bit of a collage sense to it, in the way that there's kind of rough edges in the music. There's a little bit of distortion. We hear a couple of different musical influences coming together in there, and I also thought it was important to use the Davis piece "Black Satin." And there again, just sort of, taking that idea of collage in the early 1970s, Miles Davis was making records that were uh, very often sort of collages in their own. That is, he would sometimes have musicians improvise, and then he would splice together, or an engineer would splice together bits of tape, and so we would have sections of music that weren't necessarily played at the same time, but they would be layered in such a way that it seemed as though they were in some cases, and then some cases there would be these sort of strange edits where you would recognize that it wasn't happening in the same time, and then he would add music over it. So you get this real collage style experience through the music itself. Um, and I know that we're getting close on time here. Terry Evans with Carl with twins and Carl with calf. For whatever reason, I thought that it would be fun to go to Canada at the beginning of this journey and start with a piece from Katie Lang. Of course, I think sometimes we miss out on the fact that there's an enormous part of Canada that's prairie, and there's a lot of ranching and so forth, just as there is out here in Kansas, that it extends into Canada. And I thought that Katie Lang perfectly captured on the song Western Stars this sense of being out in the open with the big sky.
Western stars light up the sky. Hear the desert wind roll by tonight.
And that, to me, is sort of the sound of, if you've ever driven on a isolated highway in western Kansas late at night, and seen the irrigation machines and blinking lights, and this sense of where's the next town and where's the next gas pump, and so forth. That, to me, kind of captured the isolation. And I have to just play a little bit of this piece by the New York-based band Sus, an instrumental called Wichita, which I included, I think, for fairly obvious reasons. And there are many songs written about Wichita or inspired by Wichita, and that particular piece, which I hope you'll hear on the playlist, I think captures the spirit of this place that we call home. Want to just quickly go to Zhuang Hon's family tree, and again, this one provided some challenges in that I didn't want to do something that was necessarily too obvious with the playlist. I thought about things dealing with masks and so forth, and I decided to use music that was a little bit stranger in this sense, music that kind of reveals itself in different ways, doesn't necessarily start off, doesn't necessarily end in the way that it started off. And one of these pieces was from the Kronos Quartet, Dark Was the Night, which I'll just play a clip of here. So again, I didn't want to go too literal with the image, and just thinking about how that piece progresses and how it progresses in the context of the playlist, giving somebody something that would sort of peel back the layers. When I look at this image, I've spent a lot of time with it on different viewings, and just waiting for it to sort of reveal its mysteries. Anne Resnick's Spring, of course, this one I chose to go a slightly different route, and I used a fair amount of instrumental music and a fair amount of jazz in it. John Coltrane's Naima, which is one of my all-time favorite songs, and as well as music from Cassandra Wilson, a remake of the Hank Williams tune, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. And I see that we're running a little bit behind here, so I don't want to race through too quickly. But Benny Andrews provided some interesting things for me to think about with this one. I leaned heavily into the music of Curtis Mayfield, who I absolutely adore his music and his lyrical content and his way of committing to a message in a way that was not heavy-handed or too on the point, and ultimately transcends the era in which the music was written, but at the same time is, I think, also reflecting a historical moment. Okay, I'll finish with this one. This, of course, from Alice Aycock, being here in Wichita, thinking about wind and so forth and so on. And I chose to open this playlist up with a piece by the guitarist Steve Morse called Ghost Wind. And I thought it was sort of important to sort of ease into the playlist and maybe create something that was not quite what was expected, and also keeping in mind that idea of wind, which of course we're also aware of in Wichita. So I will close that out, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Jedd. That was amazing. I can't wait to listen to all of them in full. And so I'm going to, before we start questions, I'm going to go ahead and sort of walk you guys through how you can access all of these Spotify playlists. So First thing is the Spotify app, which looks like this. That's our icon right there, is available on both the App Store and Google Play. And if you're using the Spotify app, simply search for Ulrich Museum of Art, and it will take you to our profile, and it will list all of the playlists that Jedd has curated. The second thing I want to show you is how you can access them on our website. So if any of you haven't visited our new website yet, I hope you will. So if we go to exhibitions and current exhibitions, you will find the Ulrich and Artist in You Community Billboard Project. And within here, we have a link to our Spotify page and also to the Smartify app if you want to use that while you are touring the billboards. If you click on the link for the Spotify page, it's going to take you to Spotify's, well, it might. It's going to take you to Spotify's web version, right to our page. And so you can listen to everything right from your computer if you'd like to. So it's super easy. Okay, now, like we did last month with Senior Wednesday, I went ahead and sent all of you notifications to turn on your video and turn on your mic so we can all gather together for the Q&A, and you guys can ask your questions yourself. So I'm gonna start that process. It might take me a few minutes to go through all of you, but you'll receive a notification to turn on your mic and your video. But don't panic. If you don't want to turn on your video, you don't have to.
I see some familiar names here.
Yeah. It'll be lovely to see all of you again. I look forward to this every month. It's not quite the same as gathering in the galleries, but it's good enough. So it'll take me just a minute. I have to do it one by one. I wish Zoom would come up with a quicker and easier way to do this. Hi, Don.
Hello.
Hello. Have we met, Don, in person?
I don't think we ever have, Jedd. We're
Yeah.
Facebook friends, but
Yeah.
I listen to you an awful lot.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you in sort of in person.
Yeah, great. Can we start questions, Jana, or are you still playing?
I'm still playing over here, Don. It's one by one. I'm making
Okay.
my way through.
Okay.
Hopefully everyone's getting their notifications. If you guys have any questions or problems or not sure how to do it, just send me a note in the chat box. Hey, Lee.
Hi.
Don. How are you both?
Good.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, goodness. Don, if you want to go ahead and kick off the questions.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like you're anxious. You've got one ready to go.
I assume you thought it was just too literal on the I'm a Man one to either use Muddy Waters or the Yardbirds versions of I'm a Man.
Yeah. I to be honest, there are so many things, in retrospect where I go, oh yeah, why didn't I do that? Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw those. But my obviously my musical library is not anywhere near as extensive as yours. So I like what you put together for that, though.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And the reason I like your show is you expose me to music that I wouldn't otherwise normally sample myself, and so it gives me a chance to, hey, listen to this. It's interesting. So, thank you.
I lost a little bit of your audio, but I think I caught most of that. So thank you. I appreciate the compliments, and I appreciate your listenership.
For everyone who hasn't turned on their video cameras, if you'd like to ask a question of Jedd, just turn on your mic and go to it.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Did you consider using Nina Simone's Strange Fruit for the Benny Andrews?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that was right on the tip of going in there. Yeah, it was just
A little
right.
too
It was so
literal.
close. Yeah, I don't even think it was so literal. It was I just sort of made a decision at the last moment. I thought, okay, if I'm going to keep it within the time length and so forth, I think I'll go with his other piece. But yeah, that's an excellent. And there's a wonderful singer named Betty Lavette has just done a new version of that song that's out. It's incredible. Yeah, it's amazing to think. Sadly, how relevant that song continues to be. But it, of course, it's an important part of history and musical history as well.
Yeah, did you play Betty Lavette singing that song on your program not too long ago?
Yes, I have. Yep.
I heard it. Oh my
Okay.
gosh. I was transfixed by that version of the song. I
Yeah.
thought I just heard it for the first time again, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
Mm,
I will be playing plenty more of her in come September. So
great.
Do we have any questions from our non-video participants?
shy people.
Everyone's still having coffee, sitting in their pajamas.
Well, I think this was such a great idea. And, you know, thank you so much for doing it. And I'm always looking for ways like Don to get turned on to new music. So I'm grateful for that as well.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question. Hi, Jedd. I'm not going to turn on my video, but I'm here. This is Ksenia. I'm the curator at the Ulrich. I guess sort of a larger question then. How much time, because you just seem to have this kind of encyclopedic knowledge of music of all kinds from all places and times. Like, how do you do your research and how much time do you spend on it and how do you go about building that kind of incredible store of knowledge in your head?
So the short answer is how much time do I spend? I guess a lifetime. I don't mean that facetiously at all. It's sort of I just I hear about music and I have to know if I read a name or something that's kind of unknown. I figure, well, I should know who that is and I should know something about them. So I try to file things away and research them as time allows, and dive into music that I'm unfamiliar with as time allows as well. So it's a daily thing, just to sort of keep it all straight and keep looking for something new. So I always joke that kids my age, they were having their parents read books to them, and I would grab one of my brother's records, and I would have my father read the liner notes to me, and that continues to this day. Except my dad isn't doing it anymore. I'm doing it for myself.
Awesome.
I guess I have a follow-up question then.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so much music content is digital now. Like, I haven't come across a set of liner notes in. I mean, I'm a bad music consumer. Like but like, what's the culture like around that? Because now it's just digital content without the kind of accoutrement that you would have with a record or with a CD.
Yeah, that has become something that is really hard to deal with, especially on the professional end. I'm lucky that I still receive some physical media with my job, and of course there's information there, or I get press releases, but sometimes there isn't, and so it's frustrating, for instance, to do an interview with a musician and not knowing that they have an amazing guest on the record because it's not listed anywhere. And some records that are available digitally, sometimes there's liner notes and sometimes there isn't. So that becomes a chase of trying to track down press releases or scouring a website, just sort of keeping one's ear to the ground to keep track of it. That's the hard part about it. The easier part is that because there is so much information online now, some of it is actually relatively easy to track down. If it's correct is the other part of it. But occasionally, I'll speak with a musician. I'll say, "Oh yeah, you were a guest on such and such a record," and they'll say, "I was." No, that's incorrect. I wasn't there. So.
Vinyl has become very popular again.
Yeah.
My wife and I inherited her family's Sears hi-fi stereo console not too long ago, and dug out a lot of my old vinyl records, her old vinyl records. But for Christmas, she ended up getting a lot of new vinyl records, and a lot of artists are putting things out in vinyl now, which gives you liner notes and gives you cover art and all kinds of neat stuff.
Yeah. Very true.
Jedd, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Ranjit from the museum, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed putting the playlist together.
Yeah.
One thing I like about the Billboard project itself is that it takes you into different parts of town and different neighborhoods, and your playlist similarly took us into different neighborhoods musically. And as someone who likes to think that I have a wide taste in music, I found myself agreeing with so many of your playlists and saying, "Oh, I love this artist," and but I was wondering what your limits are musically. Are there certain neighborhoods you don't go into, like pop music, or what would be the areas that? Because I was really impressed with the diversity of music.
Oh, thank you. There isn't much that I won't listen to. I mean, I sort of try to keep an eye on the pop world. That's probably a little bit of a weakness. I grew up, I think, like most people, listening to top 40 radio, and I don't connect as often with that world as I would like to, but I do try to keep an ear to it. Just knowing that at some point it's probably going to intersect with something else. Somebody's going to remake the pop hit of the year or something, and I'll be embarrassed if I don't know where it came from. So I try to be a good generalist and try and dip into as much as I can. It's usually just a case of what is their time for, and the one thing there isn't a lot of time for is sort of recreational listening. People will say, "Oh, what do you listen to when you're at home?" And boy, it's rare for me to just have a record that I sit and listen to just for myself. But that's okay.
But do you listen to like electronica as much, or are you do you go down those paths?
A little bit, especially with. I think I put Soft Pink Truth on one of the playlists, and that's a man who likes to take techno and house music and then feed it through different lenses and so forth. So and ambient music. Those aren't necessarily the first things I reach for if I'm gonna go on a road trip or something. But I'll dip my toes. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for your help, by the way.
Oh, sure. It's fun.
I have a question.
Drew.
Yeah, I'm obviously a big fan. I'm fanning out on you right now. But I really appreciate everything you do for the local artist community. And then as far as the museum, I mean, wow. I just feel like it's very important right now in this time, obviously any time, but especially now, to connect in this way, the Zoom way, share music, every little thing that someone can do to keep us focused on the most important thing in life, which is art of any medium, I do believe. But I guess there's no really question there, just a statement. But like I say, I'm just a big fan, and I really appreciate the museum doing this and everything you do for the local music scene. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Drew.
Oh, thank you, Drew.
I have a private question here I'm going to try and answer. Anyone else? Well, if anybody comes up with anything, I'll just sort of give out my email address, which is Beaudoin, Beaudoin. That's all the vowels, not in order, at kmuw.org. And feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to answer any questions or hear anything you have to say. I really appreciate you all coming.
Well, thank you.
And I know Jana does too. Thank you, Jana. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You got us all thinking about how to match music with images.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
heard David Byrne's cover of I Want to Dance with Somebody
Yeah.
over this past week. It's so great.
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh, that would be good for the Beaudoin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Jedd's not done yet. There'll be another round of playlists with the billboards that go up in what month? September?
Yeah.
And October and November. So be sure to keep checking back. Because, I'm sure they'll be just as amazing as the ones he's produced so far for July and August billboards. So
Yeah, we got another round going up next week. So, and they're great. They're really great.
Yeah. And everyone be sure to register for Hank Willis Thomas and Dr. Deborah Willis next Tuesday at 6 p.m. It will be an amazing talk. And we are still lucky that they were able to find the time to join us. So everyone sign up. All right. It's good to see everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks,
Aww.
Thank you.
Oh.
Don.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Puppy
You
love.
too.
See you.
Anna.
Hi. I'm not shy now that we have a smaller group.
Oh,
Everyone have a great day.
thank you, Joanna.
Hi, Joanna.
Oh,
Thank you, Jedd. That was awesome.
Bye now.
thanks, Drew.
Anytime.
Yeah, thank you, Drew.
I really enjoyed it. Trust me.
Well, good. I hope
Really
you
do.
can join. I hope you can join us for more of our virtual programs this semester.
I just really think it's awesome that people are doing something like this. I know that limitations of Zoom are kind of challenging, especially for musicians that are trying to play along. But for you doing this and the whole thing about the billboards to listen to a sound from somebody that has a playlist different than I would have thought, that's really, really intriguing, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, good.
Excuse the mess, my maid's off.
I see your kitty.
Well, she got mad because I didn't put her on camera, so she left. But I appreciate you giving her a shout out.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, Drew, and I hope we'll see you again soon.
I'm gonna sign up for the emails, and I want to watch all these, even if I don't comment or chime in. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Hey.